Welcome to the Trueface podcast. I'm Robby, your host, and just a guy trying to figure out life. We've all read and learned about the peace and the freedom that Jesus makes possible, but I don't know about you, but a lot of us struggle to experience that as much as we hope. We get stuck in our relationships with God and others, and we wonder, is this really all there is to it? This conversation is designed to help you take a step in trusting God and others, to live more fully alive. So whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to subscribe, share, and join our growing community of Jesus followers at trueface.org. So on this episode, I'm really excited. I today got to meet a guy that I've been fangirling for a while. I've been reading his stuff, learning from him from afar. Jim Wilder, he has extensive clinical counseling experience. He's the chief neurotheologian of my Life Model Works. And in case you're wondering what a neurotheologian is, it works in the intersection of brain science and theology. He developed the Life Model, which is helping build Christian communities through equipping existing networks with the skills to thrive. He's PhD, a bunch of educational stuff, MAs, theology, and he's been training leaders and counselors for over 4 decades on 5 continents. He's authored a whole bunch of books and with maturity and relational skills, and he is a guy that I've looked up to as a Trueface tribe guy. He's one of them that when I read his stuff, I'm like, this guy's smarter than me, and he gets it, and I agree. And 2 of the books I will show you. I've got them renovated, amazing. If you're on YouTube, you can see my notes at the end of this. That means I really was impressed by the book. And the other half of church was a game changer. And I think every ministry leader, every person should read that because it gets to the root of how God designed us and how we experience transformation. So Jim, that was a long intro. What did I miss? And welcome to the Trueface podcast finally, man.
Yeah, well, it's great to be with you, Robby. And what did you miss? Well, life is an adventure in trying to discover who God created you to be. And I try to write down all the mistakes I've made along the way, which is why I've got so many books, and hope somebody else learns from them. Yeah. But thanks for mentioning the books.
Yeah, I definitely have. So keep writing. What is, you just came out with a new one, Growing a More Human Community. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, it was based on a book that used to be called Living with Men, The Complete Guide to Living with Men. In terms of what does it look like to be a man at all ages, from newborn all the way up through the end of your life. But of course that means everyone's supposed to grow and mature. So, I split it into 3 parts that included more about women and building a community. Because really when I started out, my question was, are men actually good for people? The mood in the world was that men cause all the trouble. They have all the wars, they do everything else. So who did God create us to be? And if we're good news, how do we grow into those shoes? So the first one's called Becoming Me, growing individual identity. The second one is Becoming Us, growing a group identity, which you do starting at your teenage years and your family, and then becoming we the people. How do you grow the people of God, which is ultimately what God seems to be doing from the beginning to the end of the Bible, is he's growing a people that live the way he's supposed to. And that's what it means to be truly human. And I spent a lot of time thinking about how do we do that together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was fun. I should have recorded our conversation, getting to know each other and learn out about this stuff before we started pushing record for this podcast. But we were talking about part of our conversation was talking about the difficulty in the church, in helping create thriving cultures of discipleship, which means and connotates transformation. And you asked me, you said, well, how do you define transformation?
Yeah.
Which was a pretty fun conversation because that's the outcome that we're hoping for, that then, okay, what's off?
exactly.
Tell us a little bit about. Now I get to ask you back and actually record it. But thankfully we weren't recording when I started defining it. But how do you, when you think of the church and transformation, unpack a little bit about your perspective as a neurotheologian.
Hmm. Well, if I was going to aim for the brain, which I do, that's always part of the discussion right here. The back half of the brain is all based on fear and trying to make things stop and just sort of, you know, get the results that you're trying to look for. The front part of the brain has all your identities and values. And so the problem we have basically is that very early on in life we start being performance based and thinking, what do I have to do in order to make this happen?
Mm.
And Jesus makes an interesting comment that's true in several contexts, but says, what use is it for you to get everything in the world, but you lose your identity? We tend to think of it in terms of eternal, salvation, but it's more than that. It's like, what's the point in winning if in fact you lose yourself in the process? And that is what happens when you have too much fear in your life. You end up going, well, if I say that, this is going to happen. This won't turn out. People won't like who I am. They're not going, if they find out I'm a Christian, or stuff like that.
Mm.
So we're, this process of moving from fearing and anxiety and that to loving and relating to others and being present and engaged in the moment. As the presence of God in the world, it's going to make a difference. That's kind of the thing that I'm looking at for transformation. So when people transform, their relationships have a chance to get much better. People around them feel loved. Particularly, the psalmist says, make me the delight of your eyes when he's talking to God. And this is what people do when they're really starting to transform. They feel like I'm the delight of God's eye, and by George, so is everybody else that he's looking at. So I'm going to let my face represent God's delight to be with you. And suddenly relationships start to be really meaningful. We stop fearing things because it's like if something goes wrong, but they like me. So, if they like me and care about me and, we're going to stay together and make the relationship bigger than the problem.
Mm.
And, those are the things that I look at in terms of transformation. Ultimate test, Dallas Willard said, was loving your enemies spontaneously. And so, when you're really good at being God's presence in the world and you're here to love people and they're going to be your enemies, you go into every situation going like, even if you enemy up on me, it's like, yeah, it's a problem you have. Let me just try to, warm you out of that with God's grace.
I think that that principle of delight in God's eyes. So when we imagine how God is looking at us,
Mm-hmm.
that and the byproduct of that is loving others,
Mm-hmm.
and spontaneously loving our enemies, as Willard said, would be the ultimate manifestation that we are receiving something.
Mm-hmm.
Unpack a little bit more, like
Yeah.
what
Well,
does
let
that
me
mean? Because
let
that's
me
a
let
huge
me push
principle.
let me just push back at you on that one because you just used the word imagining and actually, if we go back to the brain, imagining right comes up here in our performance center, where our real identity is down here in our present in our body. So it's more a matter of experiencing God being pleased with us. It's the ability to really feel his smile. I say feel his smile because I never see his face. I mean, it's like some people do, like, oh, I see Jesus, like, well, lovely that you do. I don't, but I can feel that smile, So,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, so that's the first thing. It's actually has to be experienced sort of in your body while you're in the present moment, or it's not engaging your whole brain.
Mm.
So, I mean, people, as soon as I say body, they go, oh, are you some kind of a new age somebody or another? No, the new age came to the body very lately. If you actually read the original Greek and Hebrew texts, it says a lot of stuff about our body, and so,
Mm-hmm.
and I think
Mm-hmm.
actually God may have created it as, at least in my theology. So, but let's go back to your question because I derailed you. What were you asking?
Yeah, I think that's a really important differentiator between it. It's not imagine, it's what do we experience in
Mm-hmm.
the presence of God? Unpack for me more of what that is, because and why do you think that experiential part is so, it feels so under processed in the Western church? So you can take it either way. You can talk about the church, or you can talk about the outcome, the experience of it, or both.
Well, the first thing I'll just say briefly about the church is the Bible really got translated pretty much once the Enlightenment came around. And so most of the people doing the work were looking for the most abstract word they could find, to sound really, smart about it all. And so, uh, when they, when Jesus said, unless your stomach turns, when look at somebody, your God isn't going to forgive you. We translated that compassion, unless you have compassion. Well, compassion and, having your stomach, feeling in your stomach are the same experience, sort of. But going back to the other half of church, our left hemisphere is predominantly verbal and's got ideas. It's always so over focused it can't grasp reality. And
Mm,
so it's good for solving a problem, but it always solves a problem at the risk of losing track of where we were going to begin with. Uh, and so we put a lot of our Christianity over there. The problem is our character's on the other side, on the right side of the brain. And so the question is, how do we actually get our Christianity into the part of our brain that has our character? And that would be the other half of church. Go back
yeah.
to that. We've got the ideas, and we shouldn't let go of the ideas because those are the ones we use to correct what's wrong. But loving your enemies spontaneously doesn't happen no matter how long you have been reading the text that says, you should love your enemies. And the reason for that, sort of going back to what we were saying before, was that it is actually in the attachment, the relational region of the brain. And so our brain doesn't really let our relationships, our identity change, our character change, unless whatever happens to change it is in the context of a relationship with someone we trust. Probably sounds familiar to you because I think that's what you end up working on, right?
That's right. That's right.
Uh-huh. In fact, I was just thinking in terms of spontaneously loving your enemies. You were telling me that you had been in Pakistan for a while.
Yeah,
And I presume that you didn't go there assuming everybody would like you to begin with and want to enjoy everything you had to say, right?
that's
So
right.
you came in predisposed to say, I need to love people that may or may not like me to begin with. Now, I
Mm,
suppose we could just do that when we go home and we think our wife's going to be mad at us,
hmm.
right?
That's right.
It's the same thing. Most of our enemies are actually in our house, and we wouldn't really call them enemies, except that when we look at them, we go, I don't think she's or he or that. When my son doesn't clean his room, I don't think he's on my side. Instantly, it's like there's an enemy. But do I go in to be relational or do I go in to solve this problem?
Mm.
Yeah.
Talk about how that could, how many of us have that same issue with God in different ways as we go before Him. Not that He's our enemy, but there are, well, for a lot of my life, my shame story is that God is low grade disappointed that I'm not stewarding what He had entrusted to me. And
Mm-hmm.
so, does that same principle work with God that gets in the way? And
Yeah. Uh, well, for this, let me just pull up the brain again a little bit. It's the right side of the brain that I'm holding up here. Information comes in the bottom of the brain, goes around this way. This is the relational region where we share thoughts with other people. And it gets right up here to the right dorsal medial prefrontal cortex. Not that anyone really cares all that much about it, but that's where our brain runs simulations and it figures out what's going to happen if I do this or that or the other. And it's an imagination center that we imagine all the possible outcomes. It also is if we let it take over, which we often do, it's where we get the best performance. So instead of going all the rest of the way around the process and getting down to an embodied person here to say, what would be true to my values and who I've really been created to be, we end up trying to figure out what's going to get the best results from other people. So when someone doesn't feel like they're on my side, the performance center starts working on how am I going to win, as opposed to how am I going to really form a closer relationship with you where we can be on the same side. And that's really the same, is God on my side?
Yep.
Yeah. But do I feel like he's on my side or he's displeased with me, you see? So we get up here and our own judgments may say, yeah, God says he's for me, but he really doesn't like me. He's not really on my side. My side, if you understood it, doesn't really want to go to church so much as I'd like to go skiing on Sunday. My side wants this, like God, he's not on my side. So do I perform to get his pleasure, the right response from him? He won't toast me or, turn me aside, whatever it is. And because very rarely do we ask the question, but who am I really? It turns out that our performance selves get extraordinarily good development. And in fact, I have the opportunity very often to get pulled into ministers melting down, all those situations that go wrong in the church. And almost inevitably, their personal relationships have become low joy, where the people around them aren't that glad to be with them. But their performance self, their public performance self is, going great guns. And so there's this discrepancy between inside, I feel sort of like alone, but outside, I'm performing. And if I let up for a moment, I'll lose that too. So there starts to be this gap between what I really feel like inside. Well, if you knew who I really was, you'd realize I'm kind of tired of performing up here. You wouldn't like me. And that feels like my real self is this disliked part, you see, because we're rejecting it. And so when we're hiding any part of ourselves from God, then we feel like, well, he's not going to like us if he finds us, as though we could actually hide ourselves from God. But we fool ourselves into thinking that, right?
Yep.
And we think our performance is going to be what he's glad for, and it's up to us to make God look good. So now we're really stuck. And you can do that at work. You can do that with your family. You can do that with your children. You can do that with your friends. You like my performance, but would you really like the real me? And so the real me doesn't show up. And if you'll notice, this performance self is about 1 inch to 1.5 inches behind your real face. This is the only part of your brain that actually has in connection with your real face. And so you can actually
What do you mean by that, your real face?
Your muscles, you've got like 200 muscles around this eye just to show joy and emotions. Your expressions on your face, all of those are connected to your true identity self. And your performance self is, the Greek word translated hypocrite in the New Testament? It's an actor. It's somebody who's put on a false face. So we can live about 1.5 inches behind our faces in our performance face and just put on whatever we want our performance to look like. It could be a poker face or it could be all kinds of things. It feels somewhat like us because we've been working on that performance. You know how early you start that? 18 months of age, babies have figured out that they get better results if they hide their feelings and just act a different way. So
Wow.
from 18 months on, we start developing this and we think, well, that's who I really am because that's who everyone has seen. Whereas who we truly are, if we let that shine through, is usually immature and undeveloped. And, so now we don't want to let it out. But that's where our character is. It's like, well, yeah, I know I get better results, or I think I would, uh, by trying to pretend to be more than I am. And that's what we always pretend, right? We always pretend to be bigger than we are. Do you ever notice that all God's enemies in the New Testament and the Bible pretty much were giants? They're all these oversized characters, supermen, whereas the real people were kind of small, puny, much more unimpressive, but more lovable.
Yeah.
And if God actually was smart, and he knew who you were going to be, and it says in Ephesians 2:10, he created good works ahead of you, a time for you to do. That means the real you would be doing good works, would be pleasing God. It'd be exactly what he wanted you to and needed at the moment, right? If he knew where you were going to be living, right? He said, well, I've created this Robby person, and when he is who he was created to be, it's exactly the right solution at the right time in the right place in the world, every place I send him. Wouldn't that be genius?
Would be nice.
Yeah. But most of the time I feel like, whoops, I'm the wrong person at the wrong place, in the wrong time. I'm not prepared. And that voice that says, there's got to be something wrong with you, so don't show up, is, I think, the voice of the enemy of our souls. And it's the voice that the world gives us. And so how we go about finding our true selves and living in real time is a group project.
So, I want to unpack this and connect it, because is that shame, that lie the enemy wants us to believe, that's connected to performance in the top front part of the brain, but does it originate in the fear basis? Does fear go to the performance? Are those interconnected?
Near the base of the brain in the amygdala, one of the first systems, it's always looking to see, are people happy to see me? So when you look at somebody and you're being yourself and they're looking like, oh, I could care less, or like they're not happy to see me, they're not liking this self, and that's the basic origin of fear. People aren't joyful to be with me.
Yep.
Oh, not you again, or you're going to embarrass us, or whatever the message is, that says, well, you better get this one right, because, that gives us our shame. And then the left hemisphere has to explain why that happened. And that it comes up with these screwy beliefs. There must be something wrong with me. There's, usually for children, the easiest way to do is blame yourself, because you can at least change yourself. You can't change the rest of the world. So, most children start out with that. And then there's always somebody around. And if not, you can get on social media and find somebody who will tell you what's wrong with you.
Yep.
So those beliefs all get piled on top of it, but they're not the origin. They're sort of all the scar tissue left over. And it has to be cleared out of the way to go back and find, your true self. Well, God doesn't say that about you.
Yeah.
So there's no condemnation in those that are in Christ Jesus. Are you feeling condemned? Well, yeah. Okay, well, something is running wrong in your relationship with God. Let's go back and how about sitting on Papa's lap and talking to him about it? Well, he doesn't feel like a papa to me, and I don't think I want to sit on his lap. And I'll tell you this, I pray with people to help them experience God's presence. And I say to them, okay, we'll invite Jesus to be with you. Is Jesus there with you? Oh, yes, I see him here, or I feel him here. Well, what is he doing? He's slapping my face because he doesn't like me. You go, oh, okay. Now, I think to myself, that can't be the real Jesus. But if that's the real the Jesus that you carry in your head,
Mm.
no wonder you don't want him around.
Yep.
So, we've got to get to a more relational connection with God and with his people. If this stuff's going to begin working with us, we have to get a God that we can trust with our weaknesses.
The now performance is a response to the fear
Fear.
and the
Mm-hmm.
connection with God, and it also it, it competes against the true face, the identity at the bottom part of the front brain that you were showing. And did you say, like, we in performance we can experience the joy of connection if it's performance?
We won't experience the joy of connection in our bodies.
Mm.
When we're doing it, it'll sort of feel like fantasy or imagination. It's because that
Yep.
is the
It's
fantasy circuit. You're sort of living in your own imagination, and it looks like people are happy. But if I say, what does it feel like inside me? It's like, well, it still doesn't feel quite connected here. And
it's
does
the
it
mass
compete?
that's receiving love.
Yeah. And does it compete? Well, in a way, yes. But again, we're going this circuit. The information on the right side of the brain starts in the back, goes towards the front, and if it gets stuck here, it may never get to our real in our real identity. So
Mm.
instead of growing a real identity, it's sort of like atrophied, while our
Hmm.
performance is growing. In a
Yep.
big way. So, and if
When
people
you
around us really want that performance, it's hard to give that up.
is is that why so many that it feels extra difficult for ministry leaders to feel known and loved because there's more pressure to stay in the performance from the people that they have, or are there to serve?
Yeah, we find that the rates of narcissism in ministry leaders are way up above the average, and that is because people want a leader that will perform well and make them look good, and so the pressure is on.
Mm.
And if we don't have a good sense of who I am is really loved and cherished,
Yep.
it may be inadequate from my point of view. It's always going to be smaller than. Well, don't you notice every time Jesus shows up, he presents his disciples with a problem bigger than they can solve? Like, hey, we got 5,000 people here. How about you guys feed them?
Yeah.
They go like, what? Yeah,
Yep.
that sort of thing. We should feel inadequate, right? We go like,
Yeah.
wow, what a mess. Good thing you're here, Lord.
Yep.
But we don't. We go like, oh, I must have screwed up. I invited too many people or whatever it was. Um, and so we end up, again, condemning ourselves and and hurting because we're smaller than we could imagine we could be. And that's
Mm.
the other side too. If you're a minister, what's a good minister do during the day? Does he visit all the sick people? Yes. Does he spend his whole day in prayer? Yes. Does he study the Bible for all day? Does he stay involved with his family? Does he, minister to the poor? All those things, yes, all those things all day long, yes, that would be, but you can't do it all.
Yeah.
You're smaller
Yeah.
than that. So how
Yep.
do you stay inadequate in human eyes and say, well, but if I'm who God created me to be strategically, the things that will change the world in the way God wants them changed will happen because I'll have been who He meant me to be. And that's neither impressive nor
Hmm.
difficult.
Hmm. So you're so when the performance, the pressure, when we feel the anxiety and it goes to climbs up the circuit to
Mm-hmm.
performance, I better, I should, I need to,
Mm-hmm.
those things. It is how do we not get stuck there and move into joy? It is a reminder of those truths of bigger than myself. I need God. He is, the source of that. Tell me more about how practically, because speaking for a friend, because I never feel the
Oh,
pressure
of
of
course, but
performance,
yeah,
Jim. But
but you have a
let's say
friend
for
who
a
has
friend,
this. Yes, of course.
that's right.
Hmm.
So my friend today goes, I feel pressure of performance. How do you encourage them on those patterns to move into that true identity?
Well, I think there's one element that we've left out, and uh, it's a big change that happens in your brain right about the same time as puberty, about 12, 13 years of age. And that is until that age, your brain is designed for self preservation. It's like, I'm growing me, and that's the most important thing in the world. But during that change, right there, basically a transition in your brain to becoming an adult, the survival of your people becomes more important than your own survival.
Mm,
And uh, if we are going to go back to the brain right here, here's the performance center of the brain. And we go, that's the um, dorsal-medial prefrontal cortex. We'll just shift out, just here's the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That's where the voice of my people comes to reside. It's also where we call our conscience,
mm,
and originally developed, if we had a normal development, by the being the point of view of our fathers.
mm.
Uh, this part right here in the center of the cingulate cortex, are the point of view of our mothers. But then right over here is our fathers. How does he view our relationships? And so um, the really important thing is, what will my people say uh, about this particular situation? Um, and that's where we have to actually start processing these things as adults in a group, where other people will say to us, yeah, I know you'd really like to do that, you'd like to be the hero, you'd like to pull all of that stuff off, but we're really much smaller than that, and these are the times when we're going to have to look to God to, he'll do most of the heavy lifting, and he
Yep.
just wants us to be faithfully connected. So I know it's hard to believe. Well, we'll support you, we'll be around you, and sometimes it actually means we sort of fill in for each other. It's like, well, I know you really have to go to that meeting, you don't have a choice, and you want to go to your son's game, and I'm going to go for you, and I'll cheer for your son because you can't be there. And so between all of us, we'll do, more than we could individually. These are the kinds of discussions that we have when we're in a group uh, whose survival means more than our own. And I
Mm,
think that's what the church was meant to become, as well as the family. It's a group whose survival means more than our own.
mm.
And frankly, most of the time, in at least Western cultures, it's really hard to identify who that group is. Occasionally some
Yeah,
nationalism will fill in, but who are the people we're really so committed to that we'll stick it through with them regardless of the circumstances.
yeah,
And that's those are the people who can say to us, you're not being the person you're created to be. Let's help you find your true self now. How does that feel in your body when we talk about it? Are you ready to come over here and get a hug? Are that's the kind of, I think in your language, you'd say that's the kind of trust relationships we need.
that's right.
Uh, yeah. So how would you actually put that in your language? I've just told you in mine. I'd love to hear you uh, rephrase this for your listeners.
Yeah, I'm tracking, and I'm so linear. I'm going, oh yeah, that is the um, neurological stuckness from the mask, the performance, which is isolating and it
Mm-hmm.
is not connecting. But then that shift to that character and identity, are those interconnected? Is
Yeah.
a relational, and you said earlier, group project,
Yes.
because of the reflection. One quip from The Cure is, paper mache doesn't reflect very well, which is that reflection of, to a mask. The
Mm-hmm.
mask doesn't reflect the joy, just like the experience of God's love. If it's our true face experiencing his love, we experience joy. And if it's out of a performance mask, we it's the mass that receives love. We miss out on the experience of that love with God and with others. And
Mm-hmm.
so often it is by design, love God and love others. We have each other to reflect that Christ in us to each other in order to experience love. And is there, yeah, I'll
Yeah, give
pause.
me just I'll just give you a mathematical thing. So if you take this brain right here and you run your true response, who I really am and how I really feel through that, it will show up on your face on 1/12 of a second.
Mm,
Now it'll take you a fifth of a second to be conscious of what just happened on your face. So your face goes first, your consciousness follows second. If I'm pretending and performing, it'll take a fifth to 2/5 of a second to get whatever I want you to think on my face.
mm,
So part of that is when we're face to face with another person, they read the first message. Oh, you don't really like me, but oh, you want to act like you do. We don't
mm,
know how we caught that message, but in fact, how we really feel gets sent really fast.
mm,
And if we slow it down to a conscious speed, so I'm just making you, which a performance does, it slows us down, and to a much slower speed. Um, it gives you an inauthentic message. It doesn't actually connect with the other person's true self. It's like, well, this message is coming in too slow. It's performed. I don't trust it. I don't know why I don't trust it, but
yeah,
it's not happening at relational speeds, which is what happens if I'm just free to be who I am.
mm,
Now realize, as who we are in the spirit, our brain isn't born knowing that. That makes sense to you?
yeah,
Yeah. So you're born, you know, look at any baby when they're born and you realize they haven't got much of identity, much character, much of the rest of it. But in their spirit, they've already been created to be somebody, right? So
well,
we
I'm,
actually have to teach our brain how to express who we really are.
mm,
And that is the process that takes feedback, because the identity center in the brain is mirror neurons. It's not able to see itself directly. In fact, the brain scientist says, I only know who I am by looking at the reflection in your face. How you look at me tells me who I am, because I can't see it for myself. The brain for identity requires two faces.
mm,
Somebody looking at me externally, and by their reactions I can tell. So if your reactions to me are low joy, they're shame, like, well, who I am is not very good. If your reactions to me are joy, then I say, oh, I must have value here. And so our brain is learning from people who do a lousy job of teaching. And now we've got to, as a group, uh, do a better job of correcting all of the mistaken messages that we've done, and the left hemispheric conclusions. Well, if no one's happy to see me, it must be because I am, yeah, name the cause, right?
yeah.
I got a big nose. I've got a little zit on my face. I don't run as fast as the others. You know.
I, I'm so fascinated by this because we've been, obviously teaching quite a bit for years of the interconnectivity of attachment, joy,
Mm-hmm.
connected to our identity, how we see ourselves through how God sees us, and how that's so central to everything. And that's true. All of us at Trueface, it's like, oh my gosh, when I
Mm-hmm.
change my motives from pleasing to trusting, it moves from performance to belonging of Christ in me, nothing more or less I could do to earn any more of his love,
I'll preach it.
to to exceed, to experience that changes for us to experience joy. And transformation is evidenced by how we are able to authentically be that and reflect that to those around us.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I mean, I'm nerding out, tracking with you as much as I can about like the neurological component of how our brain is designed to reflect these truths. It's like messing with my mind a little bit. Unpack for me And even the difference between imagination and experience, this is an experiential need that performance masks get in the way of. So this group
Yeah.
effort into our identity is an experiential component. And joy is a descriptor of it. Unpack for how do you think of and connect joy to this? And how do you define joy experientially?
Yeah. Well, the um, neuroscientists, especially Alan Shore, describe joy as being the twinkle in someone's eye.
Mm,
Joy is a relational experience. Compared to happiness, which is internal, I have a pleasure state inside. It's like, oh, this feels good, whatever it is. Uh, Joy is always dynamic. It amplifies. So if, well, it just had happened. Yesterday I was downtown and shopping for something, and I happened to smile at somebody I walked past, and they sort of like straight faced me. It didn't amplify, and my smile, instead of going bigger, and just disappeared. Right? Joy is that dynamic. As I'm smiling at you, you're smiling at me, which is making me smile bigger at you. It amplifies in about 6 to 10 seconds. It gets as big as you know how to get it,
mm,
and then you got to take a break. Whereas happiness, it'll go on or on, or it won't, whatever the case.
yeah.
It's not relational. So it's this interaction. And again, just to go back to the hardware right here, your attachment center is right down here in this part of the brain. And you notice your identity center is extremely close right there. Even though the path goes around like that, there's some connections this way. And if I don't feel attached to you, that works as a firewall that keeps you from being able to change my identity.
Say that again.
If I'm not attached to you, the brain has a firewall that keeps you from being able to affect my identity. So I go around the world, and people will say something like, "Well, you're the greatest teacher that I've heard," and the person means nothing. I mean, I have no attachment to me. They don't know anything. That's like all very nice that you think that. I think you're delusional, but it doesn't change my identity at all, right? Um,
Yeah.
so there's all these people that can say things to me, and it won't affect me because we have no attachment. I'm not connected. You would call it trust, I think, in your language,
Yep.
but it's like
Yep.
you're. And when we're young, it's individuals. As we get older, it also becomes the people. You're my people. You're my group. You're the ones we hang out with. You have a chance to tell me if I don't look good or if I do look good, if I'm dorky or if I'm cool or if I'm whatever it is. And it's that attachment that's necessary to get into the relational center. Otherwise, the brain just shuts it off. It goes like, "Oh, very nice you're saying that, but that's not who I am." And the problem we've had with church and discipleship and all these things is that we've tried to give people great ideas when we have no connection with them. We have no, you know, you're not glad to be with me. You wouldn't pick me out of a crowd. If you did, you'd give me an artificial smile. Um,
Yeah.
and so, the firewall says, I like your ideas. You have a nice performance, but you're not getting in here, and you're not going to change who I am. And tonight, when somebody irritates me, it won't be your voice telling me, but you know what kind of people we are when someone irritates us?
Mm.
Those will come from the people that share your life experience with you. Go like, yeah, it's really irritating, and man. But you know what? You know, this is when we get to really be the people that God called us to be and look at them and go, you know what? That irritating stuff, that's when you've forgotten who God meant you to be. And I just love to help remind you that you actually are quite valuable and lovable, even though you don't think I'm on your side. Why don't we go and just spend the time, experience how God sees you right now. This would be a good time for that. You seem really irritated. This is the time. This is the time when we need to find out who you really are. Those kind of experiences, if we've never had them with anybody, we have no idea we even have the capacity to do it. So it's like, well, those are interesting words, but I've never met anybody that, that I thought would sit in my living room or bedroom or drive in my car and say that with my kids. That's what we
Yep.
need in order to actually open the lock that would let us into our real identity center. If not,
Yep.
if we pull up the performance and go, well, what do I have to do here to get results? And
Yep.
that's how most of us live most of the time.
Is How does joy fit into the attachment identity combo?
Uh, I only attach to people who are glad to be with me.
Mm.
If you don't have joy, I mean, what's the point, right? So
Although
just
we,
just just walk around, and see who you're going to form relationships with. All the people that ignore you are the people that smile and look your direction.
gosh,
If you show no interest in me, I don't form an attachment with you, except maybe my imagination, but it's not real.
yeah.
Yeah. No, we have to have
The
joy. Mm-hmm.
However, the people that we have attached with also have the potential to hurt us. If our identity is connected to attachment, we can receive the blessing of that and the difficulty, which a lot of us in attachment have received negative identities through those people we trusted,
Yeah.
which has then put
But
up
the
the
point,
walls because we don't trust others.
yeah, the point is we're not going to touch any new people because the ones we already attached to, and,
Yes.
and they keep hurting us because they still have the access through the firewall,
Yep.
even if they're wrong.
Yep.
Um,
Gosh.
and
I
that's why we have to, under those conditions, we have to have relationships where we ultimately go back to, you and I both believe this about me, but does
Yep.
God see it that way? Let's go check it with the one who really knows. And if we don't have that kind of personal connection with God, then just our own opinions is as good as we get. And, those will usually be irritating at some level because they're not quite right. So again, as a community, we have to go like, well, let's see if God sees it the way that we do, and have that room to grow. And I think that's what discipleship is about. I think that the interesting thing that was in Jesus' use of the Greek was he said, "Go make disciples of yourselves." It's autos, the Greek word. Don't make disciples of me. Go make people who attach to you, and then teach them everything I have taught you. And I think most of the time we think we're going to go make disciples of Jesus, uh, but we're missing the attachment piece. He
mm,
didn't tell us to do it that way.
mm.
And so most of us think, in fact, there's whole groups that teach, well, don't make disciples of yourself. But even Paul says, follow me as I'm a follower of Christ. Yes, it goes through that attachment. That what gives us a permission to go through. Now we have to make sure that what flows through that is coming from Jesus, not coming from our own wounds. Uh, and that's where wisdom, discipleship groups, experience, all those things come to pay off as well, to keep us from just passing our wounds on to others.
Jim, this is so fun to understand the brain science behind the teaching. And it is like we have a pretty amazing God who
Mm-hmm.
designed and taught, and the encouragement and affirmation of the science that is worshipful. Science can be worshipful, and this is one of those conversations where I just go, God, you're amazing. The How you
Yeah.
make all this work.
To me, it feels like the hardware manufacturer and the software manufacturer were the same one. It's like, okay, I created the machine. Now you
Yep.
run it this way, it'll work really nicely. Unbelievable what you'll get out of it. Try to run it the other way, and it'll be
Eh,
that blue screen of death far too often.
That's right. And as the third part of that, I will come to redeem and make right all of it. And I mean, because even the fear to
Mm-hmm.
the performance, to the identity, to the attachment, Jesus is the answer to, we know Jesus
Mm-hmm.
is the answer to everything, but to distill Jesus's truth and redemption in each of those components, we can't do that without him. Like we can't
Yeah.
experience, and even we would have a block if we couldn't experience, not just like left brain, know that God has redeemed us as his
Mm-hmm.
beloved, loved, and liked sons and daughters. Left brain would not be enough in the vertical with him.
Right.
He has made it possible through the Spirit that we get to experience his love
Mm-hmm. Well
in
said.
intimacy with him, which is just wild because he has the right half, like
Mm-hmm.
of what we need in formation to live into our true selves and to experience the joy that he's made us for. We couldn't even do that with others without him.
Very well said. And now you just summarized why I wake up curious and interested every morning to see what more can I find out about this. How did he design it?
Uh,
How does he want it run, and how does he redeem the things that go wrong? Sweet.
Y'all, this has been a gift. I'm going to ask two things of you, Jim. I'm going to ask that we do this again and we become friends. And the second is that you leave us with anything you have for the Trueface tribe, encouragement, practical prayer, anything for any of us listening.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, sure. I'd be glad to do this again and continue. It seems like we're walking down the same path in the same hills, and so it'll be good to walk together. And I guess what I would um, leave you with is don't be surprised that when you go to explore this, all the things that don't seem to work come to your mind, because God is going to, He's going to surface all the stuff that gets in the way. And when that happens, uh, we need to be around a few people who are willing to explore it with us, because they're going like, my brain is just not processing this right. You know, I think of sort of like a cell phone, if I can't get through here, can I borrow your Wi-Fi? And we get together to get through those spots where our own experience has scrambled our signal too bad to figure it out. So don't try to find this out alone only. We are meant to do this in a group, and so that's again the thing I like about it, is that you're bringing people together to do this, not just finding a new way to perform. So bless y'all.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Jim.